Okay, welcome. Such a dramatic countdown. Hopefully that's getting your energy and adrenaline up for a really wonderful afternoon program. So we are Melly Barber and Chris Pett, the Vice President and President of DignityUSA. This is an exciting milestone in our history, our first national gathering over a 2-day period.
It's been a long 2+ years since we celebrated our 50th Jubilee anniversary in Chicago. Since then, we have experienced many changes, many representing progress in our mission and work. Others, unfortunately, reflect the historic and tragic impact of a global pandemic. But we are here to celebrate, as our logo says, the journey forward.
So while we were supposed to gather in person in San Diego this year, the pandemic made that impossible. The board and our leaders worked in consultation with the dedicated and talented NCC, our National Conference Committee, to plan this virtual gathering instead.
We will have much more to share with you when we share our thoughts tomorrow as the new board and officers are introduced. But for now, it's our pleasure to introduce DignityUSA Executive Director, Marianne Duddy-Burke.
Thank you so much, Chris and Melly, and welcome everyone. This really is an exciting moment for DignityUSA. I want to thank everyone for making being here a priority. While we can't hope to recreate what would happen at an in-person gathering, we do hope you find richness in our shared prayer, delight in seeing the names of those you know across Dignity Land, and find yourself stretched by our keynote speaker, by the workshop panelists who are helping us point the way forward, and by the vision and challenges offered in our commissioning ritual tomorrow, and as we preview our 2022 San Diego conference. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our hosts for the weekend, former DignityUSA President Lourdes Rodriguez-Nogues of Boston, and Chris Cappiello, President of Dignity San Fernando Valley in California. Have also helped to plan our prayer experiences for this gathering. Let's give a warm welcome to Lourdes and Chris.
Thank you, Marianne. We really are very excited to be here. And we have a very exciting agenda for today. As you can see, we're making use of every minute of our 4 hours together so that everyone can join us to pray, learn, dialogue, and be inspired by one another.
Absolutely. Good morning, all. It's still morning here in Los Angeles, or good afternoon, depending on where you're hopping in from. It's so great to see so many names here from all over the country. Those of us who've been using Hopin to prepare for this event have found that it's pretty easy to navigate. The schedule will tell you what is live at any point. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the Q&A and chat functions, which you're welcome to use. If you need assistance, please post your questions in the questions box or visit the help desk in the expo area, and one of our support team will reach out to help.
Now, as we begin this time together, let us join in prayer. And in particular, remember all the people and connections we've lost since our last conference and during the pandemic.
Behold love's amazing grace. All are welcome, all are welcome. Bring your hopes, bring your dreams. Mercy flows and love redeems. All are welcome, all belong. Welcome all who work for justice, bringing hope, justice. Behold love's amazing grace. All are welcome. All are welcome. Bring your hopes, bring your dreams. Mercy flows and love redeems. All are welcome. All belong. Welcome all who are forgotten, excluded and dignity denied. You are not alone, for you are God's own. Together we sing and we proclaim, all are welcome in this place. Behold love's amazing grace. All are welcome. All are welcome. Bring your hopes, bring your dreams. Mercy flows and love redeems. All are welcome. All belong.
As we begin this weekend gathering, we acknowledge that since our 50th anniversary conference in Chicago in 2019, we have lived through a time of great pain, loss, and isolation. Our faith tradition calls us to bring our laments to our loving God. As Job and Jeremiah lamented personal and community pain, and as Jesus lamented broken systems of government and religion, we too bravely bring our laments before God and pray that we might be filled with compassion and strength to become instruments of love and healing. Our response is,
Loving God, heal us. Help us to be instruments of healing in our broken world.
For all those who have died from COVID-related illness, for those who have died alone, and those loved ones we have been unable to mourn with traditional rituals, we invite you to name out loud now those you wish to remember. We acknowledge the collective pain of these losses and pray.
Loving God, heal us. Help us to be instruments of healing in our broken world.
for the events, rituals, and gatherings we have missed during this pandemic time. The weddings, the funerals, the baptisms, the graduations and the birthdays, the liturgies and the anniversaries and the dinners, and the spontaneous get-togethers with friends and family that bring light to our lives and sustain us. We mourn this loss and we pray.
Loving God, heal us. Help us to be instruments of healing in our broken world.
We mourn the continued pain and death resulting from racial injustice and inequity in this country, especially the deaths of unarmed Black Americans at the hands of police. We mourn the lives of Daunte Wright, Rayshard Brooks, Daniel Prude, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and all those victims whose names we will never hear. We firmly declare that Black lives matter as we pray.
Loving God, heal us. Help us to be instruments of healing in our broken world.
We mourn the corrosive effects of nativism and xenophobia in our country, including the pain inflicted on children and families at our southern border, and the violence perpetrated against Asian Americans during the pandemic. In recognition that we the people means all people, we pray.
Loving God, heal us and help us to be instruments of healing in our broken world.
We mourn the continued oppression of transgender people in our society and the world, We mourn the physical, psychological, religious, and legislative violence perpetrated against our trans and non-binary community. And we reaffirm our commitment to stand with them and our trans children as we pray.
Loving God, heal us. Help us to be instruments of healing in our broken world.
We mourn the continued acts of betrayal against LGBTQI people from our institutional church. We mourn the jobs lost by dedicated teachers, administrators, liturgists, and music ministers because they lived their lives with authenticity. We grieve the expulsions from church property, denials of ministry, and educational bans imposed on our community. In the face of harmful statements from bishops and the Curia, we remain confident that the church is the people of God in all our exquisite diversity as we pray.
Loving God, heal us. Help us to be instruments of healing in our broken world.
We mourn all lives lost and communities torn apart because of religious-based conflict. On this 20th anniversary, we honor in a special way the lives lost and forever changed by the events of September 11th, 2001. We rededicate ourselves to working for greater understanding among faith traditions, with a profound belief that we can build that peaceable kingdom here in our world. We pray.
Loving God, heal us. Help us to be instruments of healing in our broken world.
We acknowledge these losses. We acknowledge these pains. And as we begin our weekend together, we open ourselves to the call of the Spirit to help us shape the world we want to live in as we pray.
Loving God, heal us and help us to be instruments of healing in our broken world.
All are welcome in this place. Behold love's amazing grace. All are welcome. All are welcome. Bring your hopes, bring your dreams. Mercy flows and love redeems. All are welcome. All belong. Welcome all the broken-hearted, all whose sorrow and despair. You are not alone, for you are God's own. Together we sing and we proclaim, all are welcome in this place. Behold love's amazing grace. All are welcome. All are welcome. Bring your hopes, bring your dreams. Mercy flows and love redeems. All are welcome. All belong. Welcome all who suffer violence, all who long for safety and for peace. You are not alone, for you are God's own. Together we sing and we proclaim, all are welcome in this place. Behold love's amazing grace. All are welcome. All are welcome. Bring your hopes, bring your dreams. Mercy flows and love redeems. All are welcome. All belong.
Our community gathered here is joined by those we've lost, our community of saints who continue to inspire us and intercede for us. We remember you. We celebrate your life in love and memory.
May the angels welcome you to paradise. May the martyrs greet you on your way. May you see the face of the Lord this day. Alleluia, alleluia. Saints of God, come and lead you to the holy city, the new and eternal Jerusalem. Alleluia, alleluia.
May the angels welcome you to paradise. May the martyrs greet you on your way. May you see the face of the Lord this day. Alleluia, alleluia. They will all come out to meet you in the kingdom of God, where Lazarus is no longer poor. Alleluia,
I am the resurrection and life. All who put faith in me will have eternal life and peace. Alleluia, alleluia. May the angels welcome you to paradise. May the martyrs greet you on your way. May you see the face of the Lord this day. Alleluia, alleluia.
May the choirs of angels come to greet you. May they speed you to paradise. May the Lord enfold you in his mercy. May you find eternal life. The Lord is my light and my help. It is he who protects me from from harm. The Lord is the strength of my days. Before whom should I tremble with fear? May the choirs of angels come to greet you. May they speed you to paradise. May the Lord enfold you in his mercy. May you find eternal life. There is one thing I ask of the Lord, that he grants me my heartfelt desire, to dwell in the courts of our God every day of my life in his presence. May the choirs of angels come to greet you. May they speed you to paradise. May the Lord enfold you in his mercy. May you find eternal life.
May the angels be your guide. May they lead you into paradise and take you home to the new Jerusalem.
May the angels be your guide. May they lead you into paradise and take you home to the new Jerusalem.
There is one thing I ask of God, for this I long, for this I hope, to dwell in the house of God every day of my life.
May the angels be your guide. May they lead you into paradise and take you home to the new Jerusalem. When I cry We speak your name, we remember. We light a flame, we remember. Though life is changed now, it is not ended. In this bright promise, we remember. A life lived in Christ is a dance into the light, a light passed along as the future calls us on, a light passed along in an ever-changing song. We remember, we speak your name, we remember, we light a flame, we remember, though life is changed, it is not ended. In this bright promise, we remember, we remember, we remember, we remember.
Having expressed and released our lamentations,
Having named and honored those who have left us in life, but continue to inspire us in spirit,
we are ready to embrace the work of this weekend gathering
in a world hurting,
in a world longing for community.
we strive to be instruments of radical hospitality.
Let us open our hearts to the words of the 13th century Sufi mystic, Rumi.
Guest House by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning is a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. They may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from the beyond.
As we prepare ourselves in mind, body, and soul to welcome the changes life brings us, let us not forget the broken world which needs us. We move forward, meeting our challenges to bring kindness, healing, welcome, and justice and love into our world.
We welcome those who feel rejected
and ensure they have space at the table.
We welcome those who are treated unjustly
and walk with them in solidarity.
We welcome our transgender and non-binary community
and joyfully proclaim their truth.
We welcome those who are hungry
and share our great abundance.
We welcome those afflicted by violence
and work for peace and understanding.
We welcome the stranger
and commit ourselves to radical hospitality.
We welcome the memory of those we have lost.
And honor their lives by continuing their work.
We welcome those confined by systemic racism.
And work for new paradigms.
We welcome those waiting at our borders.
And celebrate the gifts they will bring.
We welcome those our church calls sinners.
And stand in solidarity with their truth and honor their holiness.
We welcome those who are victims of hate.
And pledge to be sowers of love.
We welcome those impacted by climate change.
And pledge to protect God's creation.
We welcome those in despair.
And pledge to be beacons of Christ's life, light, and hope.
And to all this, the people of God say,
Amen.
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 When the song of your people rings out from each steeple,
let this be the time.
When our praise and devotion sets lives into motion,
let this be the time.
When the heart of our labor promotes love of neighbor,
let this be the time.
When the care for each nation brings peace to creation,
let this be the time. Come and tear down the old ways and build up the new. Be the God of our promise, all hope rests in you. When the fire of your spirit builds a kingdom of truth, prepare us for action, let nothing distract us from you. Let this be the time.
When we see in each face those we need to embrace,
let this be the time.
When we turn and forgive those the world won't let live,
let this be the time.
When our care for creation becomes our vocation,
let this be the time.
When our deeds and good actions become our true passion,
let this be the time. Come and tear down the old ways and build up the new. Be the God of our promise, all hope rests in you. With the fire of your spirit, place a kingdom of truth. Prepare us for action, let nothing distract us from you. Let this be the time.
When the voice of the Spirit transforms all who hear it,
let this be the time.
When we turn from obsession and needless possession,
let this be the time.
When we give recognition to the one true physician, the healer who heals all our pain. When we stop and remember that you are our God,
let this be the time. Come and tear down the old ways and build up the new. Be the God of our promise, all hope rests in you. With the fire of your spirit, place a kingdom of truth. Prepare us for action, let nothing distract us from you. Let this be the time. Let this be the time.
We gather this weekend to learn, to gain insight, and to plot our journey forward. We look to our keynote speaker to help us envision that journey. To introduce our speaker, we welcome Marianne Duddy-Burke back to the virtual podium.
Thank you, Chris. One of the hardest parts of being a prophet is that you often have to proclaim unwelcome truths to the very community you love and are a part of. As a prophet, you help raise up the groaning of people to leaders failing to care for them. And the prophet generally knows that this message will not be happily received. I'm sure that our keynote speaker, Father Bryan Massingale, has found himself in that position quite frequently throughout his ministry, and especially in the past couple of years. To be an openly gay Black priest in the Roman Catholic Church in the US cannot be easy. To repeatedly be the lone voice daring to speak from that perspective is unimaginably challenging. And yet, speak, challenge, confront, unmask, and openly name ugly truths of both our past and our present, Bryan does over and over and over and over again. Bryan's academic and intellectual credentials are extensive and impressive. He currently is the James and Nancy Buckman Professor of Theological and Social Ethics at Fordham University and the Senior Fellow in Fordham's Center for Ethics Education. A leader in Catholic theology, he is president-elect of the Society of Christian Ethics and a former president of the Catholic Theological Society of America. He's also a former convener of the Black Catholic Theological Symposium. Bryan is the award-winning author of 2 books and over 150 articles, book chapters, and book reviews. He wrote the groundbreaking document for Catholic Charities USA entitled Poverty and Racism: Overlapping Threats to the Common Good. Bryan has served as a consultant to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, providing theological assistance on issues such as criminal justice, capital punishment, environmental justice, and affirmative action. He has also been a theological consultant for the National Black Catholic Congress, the Catholic Health Association, the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, and so many more. He's an active participant in the network of Catholic thought leaders advocating for the full inclusion of LGBTQ plus persons in both society and the faith community. Dr. Massingale is the recipient of numerous honors and recognitions for his academic scholarship and his advocacy of justice. Among these are 4 honorary doctorates, the Association of U.S. Catholic Priests Pope John XXIII Award for his tireless efforts to create a world where the dignity of each person is respected and protected, Catholic Charity USA's Centennial Gold Medal for Leadership and Service in the Social Mission of the Catholic Church, and the Reverend Al McKnight Award from the National Joint Conference of Black Catholic Clergy, Sisters, Deacons, and Seminarians for outstanding witness on behalf of justice for the marginalized. Bryan is also a dear friend and someone I have long trusted in having deep and honest conversations about soul-level matters and the critical issues of doing justice work well. Given all of this, it is clear why we were so thrilled and grateful when he agreed to address Dignity USA at this very critical moment in our history and this moment in time. I am very honored to introduce Bryan Massingale, one of our prophets, and his address. God heard their groaning. Can Dignity hear and answer the cries of the whole LGBTQ community? Bryan, welcome to the stage.
Wow, thank you so much. Marianne, that was beautiful. And you can tell I'm kind of choked up a little bit, but yeah, that was just, it's wonderful when a friend speaks such generous words, and you are a friend. To the Dignity community out there, it is so good to be with you, albeit virtually and over computer screens. And yes, we're all kind of tired of it, but this is our new normal, so we'll make the best of it. It is good to be with you. We need to be together. We need to come together, especially in these unsettled times as we continue to grapple with the myriad challenges that face us individually, nationally, and as a community of sexually marginalized and sexually gifted people. Note gifted. Let's not lose sight of that. We have lots of challenges, but we also have gifts. It's good to be with Marianne and Chris Pett again. They've been allies and indeed friends in this struggle for full justice and radical inclusion in both our church and society. And I want to thank especially my new friend, Logan Bear, who has been just this marvel, this tech guru behind the scenes that's made all this possible. So if this goes off seamlessly, we all owe him a drink or prayers and maybe all the above. It's good to be with you as you discern your journey forward, a journey forward into being a leading organization in the struggle for full justice and radical inclusion. Let's see, why won't this advance? Logan, I'm having some problems advancing the slide, so can you help with what's going on here? Ah, there we go. Okay, let's see if that helps any. Oh. Okay, Logan, so you're seeing why Logan is, oh, click on the arrows on the PowerPoint. Oh, okay, let's see if that works. Okay, great. Got it. Thank you, Logan. Great. See, I told you, we owe him a lot. We gather on the 20th anniversary of the multiple terror attacks in our country, when thousands of lives were lost and countless more were devastated in the New York City metropolitan area, at the Pentagon, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Here in New York, where I am, and across the country, memorials will call the names of those who have perished. But we also need to be mindful of another set of victims who were decisively impacted by the attacks, namely those of Muslim faith and Middle Eastern descent, who were and who still are targets of anger, suspicion, and fear. One of my vivid memories post 9/11 was flying on one of the first flights after the airports were reopened. I went to a conference, and at the airport, we had to go through what was then unprecedented security. Now it's been kind of routine. The airports were eerily empty. As I got to my destination and waited at the taxi stand to go to the hotel, the person in front of me became loudly agitated. He refused to get into the waiting cab because the driver was wearing a turban. He was a Sikh, not a Muslim, but his strangeness and dark skin were enough to thoroughly unsettle this customer. "I'm not getting in with him," he said. "He might try to kill me." I moved ahead of him, taking the cab that he refused. And just before I drove away in my anger, I asked, "What makes you think you're so important that he would want to kill you and risk his life?" Today, as we gather, we remember that Jews, Muslims, Christians, rich, poor, gay people, people like Father Michael Judge and Mark Bingham, immigrant workers and Wall Street executives, flight attendants, and soldiers, all were killed that day. We remember all those who lost their lives that day and their loved ones, all who comprise a human collage of many colors, ethnicities, sexualities, languages, and religions. We also pray for those who have borne the brunt of our nation's irrational fears and scapegoating. Let us pray for our nation as it struggles to count the cost paid for our fears and the trillions of dollars spent and the many lives lost fighting wars inspired by our deep, unfaced anxieties. And let us continue to pray, as we have already, for a full measure of justice and radical inclusion, for these are the hallmarks of the reign of God. Full justice, radical inclusion. I've used that phrase several times already in this short introduction. It is my deepest hope and challenge for Dignity USA as you consider your journey forward, this hope for full justice and radical inclusion. According to your statement of mission and purpose, dignity exists, and you see it on the screen, exists to witness that gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex Catholics in our diversity are members of the Christ's mystical body, numbered among the people of God. In our diversity. What does that mean? I want to meditate on that phrase and the call that it contains for full justice and radical inclusion by asking the question, can Dignity USA hear and answer the cries that come from the whole community? How will Dignity hear the cries of our sexually diverse community, impacted as we are by the realities of racial injustice, gender exclusion, and social marginalization, all that stem from our nation's and our church's complicity in white nationalism? And I want to break open the fact that white nationalism is a complex threat to all of us. And therefore, our response in justice must be complex and multiple and fully respecting of the diversity of our community. Now, to do that and let you know that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, this is your favorite slide here, the overview for the Zoom weary. I want to begin by breaking open intersectionality and how it plays a role in the coming out process. And don't worry, it won't be too academic because I'm going to make this very personal. Then I'm going to examine the challenge of white nationalism and what white nationalism has to do with LGBTQ plus persons. I will argue that it is the growing edge and the litmus test for a commitment to full justice and radical inclusion. I will end with the challenge that this presents to Dignity as it contemplates moving forward. And I'll end by offering a blessing for Dignity's commitment to be a witness of radical inclusion for our whole community in all of its glorious and beautiful and, dare I say, fabulous diversity. So with that, then it's the beginning, the middle, the end. And if we depart from the outline, it just means we're going to have a Pentecostal moment. We'll let the Holy Spirit do its thing, but then we'll become Catholic again and get back to the outline and follow everything that's written in the books with the red letters. We Catholics are good at that. So I come to this conversation, as Marianne says, as a Black gay priest and theologian. I am informed not only by my sexuality, my faith, and my study of the church's ethical traditions. I'm also informed by the traditions of the Black freedom struggles in the United States. In my own person, in my own life, I embody the complexity, or better said, the multiplicity and the diversity of LGBTQ identities. Intersectionality is a word often heard today, and happily it is being used to frame our understanding of LGBTQ reality and how we describe our community. For example, you see on the screen that GLAAD, one of the foremost LGBTQ human rights groups, declares that there can be no pride if it is not intersectional. This is an awareness that's come more and more to the forefront of our community after last summer's murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, among too many others. Now, while I could offer an academic definition of intersectionality, intersectionality is simply another way of saying we need to look at, appreciate, understand, and celebrate the whole person. While our community is united by sharing sexualities and gender expressions that differ from the majority, our sexualities and our sexual experiences are also shaped and influenced by other factors that make up who we are: race, nationality and national origin, immigration status, disability, gender expression, age, and the like. Now, all of these are important. Yet for today, I'm going to focus on how race and ethnicity influence and shape the experiences of LGBTQ persons of color, and the impact this has for Catholic LGBTQ justice advocacy. Now, I want to make this personal and explain this by talking about my coming out story. One of the bonding experiences in our community is sharing our coming out stories, our experiences of realizing, accepting, and then sharing our sexual awareness. This is one of mine, a story of coming out as a Black gay man of faith. I made my first Ignatian retreat, a silent directed retreat, as a seminarian in 1982. Yes, that means I'm old, but thank God, Black don't crack. I can say that. One of the passages I was given to pray over was the first creation story in the book of Genesis, where God creates the cosmos in 6 days. In my meditation, I pictured myself as an observer, watching the beauty of creation as it unfolded according to God's word. I saw the stars come to be, the dry lands appear, the earth's animals and creatures filling the land and the sea, and finally, human beings emerging as the fulfillment of creation. In my imagination, my prayerful imagination, my prayer, I looked at creation and saw friends and people that I knew. It was wonderful. Except as I looked at creation and at the world's people in my prayerful imagination, I noticed that when creation was finished, there wasn't a single Black person, nor were there any gay people. As I looked at humanity, at all those created in the image of God, there was no one that looked like me or loved like me. There was nothing in creation that mirrored me. This profoundly, deeply, painfully shook me. My spirit ached, because it meant that despite 8 years of Catholic grade school education, 4 years of Catholic high school, 4 years of Catholic university as a theology and philosophy major, and 3 years of graduate seminary training in theology, and being an honors student too, very proud of that, that despite what I've been taught about how all human beings were created in God's image and likeness, at some deep place within me, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it. My own prayer betrayed that I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that God could be imaged as Black or as gay, and certainly not as both simultaneously. When I reported my prayer experience to my retreat director, she wisely said, "Well, I think you have some work to do." So she gave me other passages to meditate on, passages that spoke of God's love. She invited me to pray with these, but I couldn't. I didn't want to. I didn't want to hear about God's love because I was angry. I was furious at God for making me Black and gay. I remember waking up one night, beating my pillow in rage and in sorrow, saying over and over, "Why did you do this to me? I didn't ask for it. What kind of God are you? Why would you do this? Why would you make me like this to endure all of this pain and hurt and rejection?" I screamed and yelled, shaking and sobbing with angry, bitter, sad, burning tears. It was only after I cried and moaned and screamed and yelled and exhausted all of my hurt and anger, my fear and pain, my outrage. It was only then that God could break through the cracks of my soul. Then I could hear God when I read these words from the prophet Isaiah. "You are precious in my sight, and I love you." I wept again, crying tears of joy, a joy that was inexpressible. And then I could pray the second creation story from the second chapter of Genesis, the one where the earth creature is formed out of the ground. And I saw myself as that original human being and felt God blowing life, God's life into me. And I was at last, truly a part of God's creation. That's one of my coming out stories. Coming out as a Black gay man of faith. Coming out to God, or rather letting God come into me. My story mirrors a familiar one to you. Maybe it's familiar to you, the struggle, the internalized rejection, the anguish, the agony of accepting the reality of who we are, and finally the joy. Except mine was compounded as I had to face and contend with a dual estrangement. Coming out as gay in a world where Catholic meant straight, and coming out as gay in a world where lesbian and gay meant white. So how is this story relevant to dignity? And especially today, how is it relevant to the challenge of white nationalism? What does white nationalism, have to do with us, you may say? I guess that depends upon who's included in us, but I'll come back to that. For now, I want to put forward this thesis. My basic message today is this: the greatest threat to the LGBTQ community in our entirety and in our diversity, the greatest threat we face is the rise of white nationalism in U.S. society. The rise of white nationalism. As I say on the screen, white nationalism is the existential, visceral conviction that this country, its public spaces, its history, its culture, that these belong to white people in a way that they do not and should not belong to others. That America is and was meant to be and should always remain a white Christian nation where white Christians belong in a privileged way. As a consequence, white nationalism sees multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy as an existential threat. It's an existential threat to white supremacy, to the feeling that the country belongs to us. Again, notice that word us. Who belongs, who's included in us? Because of white nationalism, the results of the 2020 election, with the election of the first president who ever used the phrase white supremacy, the election of the first woman and woman of color as the vice president, with the first Jewish spouse of a president or vice president in this nation's history, and the elections of the first Black and the first Jew as U.S. senators from Georgia. This election was an existential threat to white nationalist hopes and dreams, and a confirmation of its deepest fears that the country really was not one for people like us. And that meant that this election had to be overturned by any means necessary, including allegations of fraud, armed rebellion, and violent insurrection. The brutal mob violence of January 6th was a clear declaration. January 6th, it was just this year. Okay, so much has happened this year. This is not ancient history. The brutal mob violence of January 6th was a clear declaration that many white Americans would rather live in a white dictatorship than in a multiracial democracy. If democracy means sharing power with people of color, and especially with Black people, they want no part of it. White nationalism, white supremacy is inherently violent. It depends upon violence and the threat of violence, police violence, rhetorical violence, mob violence, and lynch violence to create it and sustain it. Now, some of you may be saying, okay, Father Bryan, or Bryan, Bryan's my given name. Okay, I can see how this concerns you, but I still don't get what this has to do with us. Let me break it down for you. White nationalism is a threat to the well-being of all LGBTQ persons precisely because it is intersectional, threatening social stability and human flourishing on multiple levels and fronts. Its commitment to racist political and cultural supremacy is obvious, manifested in voter suppression laws, crusades against critical race theory, which most of its opponents have never read, I assure you, and its public vitriol. But make no mistake, white nationalism is also anti-women, as evidenced in the toxic masculinity and macho posturing of its former presidential standard bearer. Remember, grab them by their private parts. The overwhelmingly male violence of January 6th, and the public vilifications of both Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Representative Liz Cheney. Indeed, the denunciation of any woman who refuses the directives of male leadership. White nationalism is also anti-immigrant and anti-life, with its cruel family separations, inhumane caging of children, and callous indifference to brown bodies seeking shelter and safety. White nationalism is also anti-LGBTQ, as evidenced in its homophobic rhetoric and its hysteria surrounding the smallest attempts to recognize the dignity of trans persons. Let us not forget it was the champions of white nationalism who denigrated trans soldiers in the military, who championed anti-trans bathroom policies, who did not recognize therapies that facilitated physical transitions as legitimate medical expenses, who appointed judges hostile to recognizing the equality of gay and lesbian-headed families, and who championed churches in their crusade to weaponize gender ideology against those who would advocate for policies to protect gay and lesbian students in schools. That's why it's important to us. And also, white nationalism is an ecological threat to the survival of the planet with its obstinate refusal to accept the irrefutable reality of climate change, and it's a threat to global health and security through its irresponsible and reckless denigration of mask wearing and vaccination in the face of the greatest health crisis to afflict humanity in over a century. Make no mistake, if you were to map the advocates of white nationalism, those who are hostile to LGBTQ equality, the opponents of gender justice and inclusion onto a map, you would see an almost perfect overlap. This diagram you see on your screen here is very misleading. I struggled and played around with this. I tried to show how if you put them all together, it's almost a perfect overlap. But if I did that, then you wouldn't be able to read the screen. Basically, if you are a white nationalist, you are also anti-LGBTQ, you are also a misogynist, all of them go perfectly together. If you are racist, the chances that you are a misogynist, homophobic, trans, hostile, and anti-immigrant increase dramatically. To put it another way that Catholics can understand, white nationalism, patriarchy, and sexual rigidity are a virtually seamless garment. White nationalism is a consistent ethic of intolerance and hatred. So I don't exaggerate. White nationalism is a grave threat, not only to democracy, not only to darker-skinned people like me, it's a threat to the entire LGBTQ community. It is nakedly racist, blatantly homophobic, violently sexist, environmentally irresponsible, and recklessly narcissistic. As you gather this weekend to consider your journey forward, if you plot that journey forward and do not name white nationalism as the grave danger that it is to LGBTQ persons, that journey you plot will be a short one and one of great peril and danger. This leads me to considering the challenge that white nationalism raises for Dignity USA. In my title of this talk, I quote the words of Exodus. I have heard the cries of my people, and I have come to deliver them. The Exodus story reminds us of how salvation history, the story of God's intervention into human life and history, how it begins with a listening to the cries, the moans, the groans of an oppressed people. For groans, the inarticulate cries of a people's distress. These groans are an indisputable sign which announces All is not well. Something is terribly wrong. This is not the way things should be. God intervenes graciously as liberator, as deliverer, as comforter. God intervenes because God first listened. And this leads to the major and principal challenge that I put before Dignity as it strives for full justice and radical inclusion in the face of the virulence of white nationalism. Whose groans, whose cries are being heard? Whose voices are welcomed and attended to? Or to put it more bluntly, the challenge is, who counts as part of the Catholic sexually marginalized community? Who counts? Let me be forthright and direct. If Dignity USA is to be credible and on the frontier as a witness to radical sexual and gender inclusion, then it must become more and more consciously intersectional in its thinking, identity, and practices. Gender and sexual justice can no longer be standalone issues. The crisis that faces the nation and the world, the crises of health, ecology, racism, patriarchy, poverty, all of these are interlocking, overlapping, and compounded. Single issue groups and struggles will be neither effective nor will they compel people's attention and support. To paraphrase the great Black lesbian activist Audre Lorde, many people do not have the luxury of single issue struggles because we do not live single issue lives. Now, yes, Dignity USA enters the struggle for full justice and radical inclusion animated by a particular vision. On your vision statement, again, your website's beautiful, by the way. Your vision statement on your website declares that Dignity works for the day when gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender Catholics are affirmed, respected, and full participants in the life of both church and society. That's wonderful. That's beautiful. I can say amen full-throatedly to that vision. But radical inclusion for gender and sexually stigmatized Catholics is impossible without a commitment to racial justice. Why? Because the opponents of sexual inclusion and racial justice are often one and the same. Remember the overlap that's there. Racial radical inclusion and full justice also requires sexual justice because many Catholic LGBTQI members are also racially and ethnically stigmatized. We live in this world where we have to contend with being rejected because we're not straight and we're not white. But there's an even greater reason why, if this vision is to be actualized, it requires a full-throated commitment to racial justice. And that is because the Catholic community, both globally and nationally, is browning. And the future of Dignity and the global LGBTQ movement is brown. As you see on the screen, even now, 70% of global Catholics live in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. 70%. The majority of US Catholics are non-Anglos. That was something that was declared at a conference on cultural diversity in the church in 2010. where the apostolic nuncio declared that we do not have diversity in the church, we are a diverse church. And if you look at the graph on the right from our friends at the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate at CARA, you notice the bar, the blue bar, indicates the proportion of people in a cohort of Catholics who are white or Caucasian. When you look at the oldest group, those born the night before 1943, over 76% are white or Caucasian. But as the church gets younger, its complexion gets browner. So that by the time you get to Catholics born in 1982 or after, only 39%, less than 40%, are white. As the church gets younger, its face gets browner. Therefore, Dignity's future as the future of the Catholic Church and of every Catholic organization is brown. This means that if Dignity is unable or unwilling to hear the voices, the moans, the groans of Catholics of color, of LGBTQ Catholics of color, if it's unwilling to be a proactive ally in the struggle against white nationalism, there is no journey forward. There is no journey forward. And so the question becomes, what does Dignity need to do now to prepare for its future? A future which is now. Now, I know that many of you, in fact, probably most of you, agree with everything I've said in principle. In principle. But let's also be honest. I'm going to make a bet that the overwhelming complexion of Dignity members is rather pigmentationally challenged. Notice how I said that. Pigmentationally challenged. And like the larger LGBTQ movement, gay white men, especially, not only, but especially, have struggled to listen to and fully honor the perspectives of lesbian women, trans persons, persons of color, lesbians of color, gay men of color, and Black and brown trans persons. This is a long-standing tension in the larger LGBTQ movement, a tension between those in our communities who want to fit into the dominant society and enjoy the privileges granted to white straight men. Assimilation, what we now call homonormativity, which is basically an acceptance of those gays, of those, homos, quote unquote, who can best approximate cisgendered white straight life. And the tension with those forces in the community that want to transform the mainstream, to implode it, if you will, and create a new space where all are welcomed and included. You last gathered together in person at your 50th anniversary conference in 2019. And at that conference, preceding that conference was the third assembly of the global network of Rainbow Catholics. Your assembly preceded your 50th anniversary convention. And I had the privilege of addressing that network. As I addressed that network and I shared my coming out story, that was the first time I ever publicly shared it, many of the delegates from Asia, from Africa, and Latin America, they came to me afterwards, some in tears, saying it was the first time they felt included in a Catholic LGBTQ space. Sadly, not everyone from Dignity echoed that sentiment. Some got it, and some wondered, what's it all about? That's the tension. That's the challenge. That's what needs to be named and contended with going forward. In the Gospels, two disciples approach Jesus and they want the places of honor when he comes into his kingdom. They want the positions of privilege, the positions of belonging. They want to be the normal ones. And Jesus looks at them and says, it cannot be that way with you. I think those words are addressed to us in the LGBTQ movement at this time. It cannot be that way with you to want to be just simply included in the mainstream, to be deemed normal. As people of faith, we participate in the larger LGBTQ movement from a faith perspective, a perspective that's animated by a commitment to the pursuit of biblical shalom. Shalom. It's a word that we translate as peace, but it means much more. Shalom is a vision of social wholeness. It's a state of well-being for all, where all have access to the goods of creation intended to meet the needs of all. Shalom is nothing less than God's intended vision for the world, a dream of God that resists our tendencies to division, hostility, fear, drivenness, and misery. Our scriptures insist that if there is to be well-being, it will not be just for isolated, insulated individuals. Rather, security and prosperity are granted to the whole community. Together, we stand before God's blessings, and together we receive the gift of life, if we receive it at all. Shalom comes only to the inclusive, embracing community that excludes no one. So all must be included in the pursuit of shalom, or none will enjoy it. The biblical vision that animates us as we participate in the larger struggle for LGBTQ justice and equality is that we are motivated by our faith's insistence that this vision of fullness, of social wholeness, of completeness, of health and safety, that it must be enjoyed by all. Or, in reality, none of us will enjoy it. White nationalism is a threat to all of us. None of us are safe, regardless of our pigmentation or our gender or our class. The vision that Dignity is called to is to bring to the larger LGBTQ justice movement and to the wider church a vision of full justice and radical inclusion, of biblical shalom for all, and especially for God's beloved and fabulous gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, and intersex people. I want to conclude on a note of hope and blessing and prayer. Being a gay man of color is not just about pain and trauma. There's that, but it's also an experience of joy. Joy was the ending note of my retreat experience almost 40 years ago. That joy set me on a path of weaving together the fragments of my life, the threads of my life into a fabulous quilt, a tapestry integrating race and sexuality and faith. And despite the struggles that Marianne alluded to, and they are real, my ongoing joy through it all is reclaiming the goodness of my Black gay body, self, culture, and faith. To see my Black gay self and body as beloved by God. And this brings me to my dream for dignity. My dream as you journey forward is this: that you become more and more a community of joy. A joy that is found in the struggle, not despite it. A joy that springs from knowing that your painful struggles against white nationalism and for radical inclusion are the birth pains of the reign of God. That you may be a community of joy, a joy that erupts in shouts of fiesta and moves to the beat of gospel songs. A joy that erupts in circles that explode in riotous dance as LGBTQ people of every race, language, and way of life sway, sashay, and slay together. Yes, RuPaul's Drag Race is one of my guilty pleasures. A joy that comes out of difficult moments of honest encounter and truthful speech that sometimes hurt, but often heal. My dream, my hope for dignity as you journey forward is that you will be the joyful vanguard of what the whole church must one day become. A church where my coming out story is affirmed and celebrated. A church where the erotic and passionate loves of all of God's people are blessed. That you will be the joyful vanguard of a church where all are truly welcome at the table. That is my prayer for you. That is my hope for you. Those are the words of blessing with which I leave you. Let the church say, Amen.
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 Thank you. Thank you, Bryan. You have inspired us. You have challenged us. You have helped us define our journey forward. And we really are grateful to you for being such a courageous prophet in our midst. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a joy to be here. It's been a long time coming, but I'm so glad I could make it. It's good to be here. It really is.
Thank you. So now it's time for our Q&A segment.
Mm-hmm.
We will do our best to respond to as many questions or comments you may have. We thank our moderator who is sorting through questions and who will help facilitate this activity. Please submit your questions via the chat box and we'll voice as many as time allows. Remember, if you see a question you like, give it a thumbs up to move it up in the priority list. Technology, I'm telling you.
I know. You can't even do that on Zoom, so this is really good.
Yeah. Bryan, while we wait for the questions to come in, I had something just to start. You spoke so much about the threat of white nationalism, and it seems like so much of what is behind white nationalism is really fear, just fear of losing something.
Yes.
And how do we make it clear or communicate, or should we even try to communicate that things like civil rights, equality, and justice are not zero-sum games. That if I get some, it doesn't mean you lose any, that it's infinite. Is that even something worth pursuing?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that all too often what happens is that we're divided from each other because we're fed this myth of scarcity, that there's only so much that goes around. And so if with one group gains, the group that's under, that means that other people are going to lose. And I think that's a real pernicious myth. And it's also, used cynically by politicians when we say, keep more of your money, all that kind of thing. It's all about you. And so the fact that I'm going to lose something. And so I think one way to do is to call out the myth and say, well, no, actually there's a whole lot when we think about the great wealth chasm in this country, and we realize that if we could spend over $2 trillion for a 20-year war that we have precious little to show for, what could that money have done in the meantime? What kind of health infrastructure could we have created? What kind of educational opportunities could we have created? So I think a lot of the fear comes from a failure of imagination. But I think another thing we have to do pastorally is that we have to help people identify what are they afraid of losing. And then to mourn the way they thought life was. Because one of the ways that white nationalism functions is that it functions by people not knowing the truth or being fed a very sanitized vision of what this country was, that we're the land of the free and the home of the brave. Well, not for everyone. and we never have been. But you would never know that by the way we tell our national story. And the thing is, when you challenge that story, people get very nervous because you're challenging their identity. They're losing something they're deeply invested in. And so I think, there's a tendency for those of us who are more progressive to say, oh, just wake up and get over it. But I think there's another thing we have to do, and we have to meet people where they are. We have to help them mourn the loss, even if it's the loss of an illusion. We have to help them mourn that loss.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So we have a question here.
Sure.
From Delphine Bautista. How do we address white nationalism within LGBTQ space?
Wow. Okay. That's another whole talk. But let me throw some ideas out there. Let's start with something that doesn't seem obvious or may seem obvious, and that is, let's look at where do we socialize? Where do we gather? For example, there's an LGBTQ ministry here in New York City, which is really fine. They do, I'm not going to call their name because they really do fine work. I have great respect for them. And they host a number of activities of, like gatherings in some of the bars in New York City. However, the bars that they gather at are precisely the ones that most LGBTQ persons of color would not feel comfortable in. That's an ugly reality we have to face about our community. And so one of the things we need to look at as Catholic LGBT organizations is, where do we gather? And are these spaces where persons of color would feel welcome and comfortable in going? That's one thing we can do. Another thing is to look at, what's our public branding? When I go, give another example. When I was at my former institution at Marquette University, there was an African-American aunt and her niece who would come to campus, and they were trying to find the admissions office. So I said, I can take you there. And he said, yeah, the reason why we're really interested in coming to Marquette is because I looked on the website and I see all the faces of people of color. and I didn't have the heart to tell her. They basically looked at they took a picture of everyone they could find that would match the description, put it on the website. We know how that works. But again, I think branding is important. So what does our brand look like? What does your website look like? What does it communicate? Who's welcome? Whose faces are present?
Great.
Cultivating, how do we cultivate, a sense of welcome? I think part of it too is what stories do we celebrate? When I teach a course on homosexuality and Christian ethics, and one of the things I do is I have them. We tell the story with the Stonewall event, which most of my students still have not ever heard of. It's amazing in this day and age. Most students that have never heard of Stonewall, and they don't know the stories of the queer, trans persons of color who were the leaders in that movement and the leaders of that insurrection. How do we tell our story? All of these are ways in which we can make LGBTQ spaces, welcoming, embracing, and not just embracing for people of color for them, but embracing of us. Again, this is our story. This is who we are. I think that's the thing I want to, if we can move away from thinking of this as an us and them issue and saying, this is a matter of who we are and of who's included in the we. That's the biggest attitudinal change that needs to happen.
That's great. That may actually cover some of this next question, which comes from Mary Burns, who asks, and I think this is probably something a lot of us are wrestling with, because we are predominantly white. How can, and we meaning Dignity, how can we reach out to those in brown communities who may not know about Dignity and who may welcome this connection?
Okay, cool. That's a great question. And let me answer it by talking about the distinction between two popular movies, TV series that are related to one another, but very different. I think many people in the Dignity community might be familiar with the movie Love, Simon. Love, Simon tells the story of a young gay teenager as he's coming to understand his sexuality. He grows up in a white, suburban, middle-class family, and it's basically telling the story. In the end, he gets this guy, and it's on this Ferris wheel. It's really wonderful, and I've seen it like 5 times because I love rom-coms. I really do. It has a spin-off now. It's on Hulu, but you can find episodes on YouTube. It's called Love, Victor. And Victor is a brown Hispanic person. And it's all about him coming to an understanding of his sexuality, but his journey is much more tortured. And it's tortured precisely because he's navigating what does it mean to be gay and brown? Because if I come out as a gay brown person, I have to negotiate faith, but faith means something different to, Hispanic Catholics than it does with a lot of white Catholics. For example, in Love, Simon, religion didn't play a role at all. It was never mentioned. In Love, Victor, it does. When I come out as a person of color, I have to come out not only to the wider gay community, I also have to come out to my own ethnic community and to my own family. And while all of us who lose family connections, and we know people tragically who have because of our sexuality, it's a terrible thing. But also it means that I can lose my family. That's my only refuge in living in a predominantly white culture. So all this is a wind up to getting to the question, what do we do? One is to understand that the coming out process is going to look different. And I think we need to even question whether coming out is necessarily the goal in all cases. I think there's an attitude in some places of the gay communities that if you're not out, then there's something wrong with you. We need to kind of get you to the place of getting me more out. That's the badge of being, proud. And I think for the story is much more complicated than that, especially for communities of color. I think one is, what do your liturgies look like? I think there's an attitude in the Catholic community that, oh, well, we don't sing bilingually in this parish because they have their own church. And I think we have to understand that, no, we sing bilingually because that is who we are. We're Catholic. Catholic means inclusive. Catholic means everybody's welcome. And I think that's one of the things that Dignity needs to look at then in terms of what's the music like in your worship. The other is that communities of color need faith reflections in the worship experiences that reflect their unique struggles. And we want to hear ourselves in the faith reflection. And that when we hear ourselves in that story, it's not just for us, again, it's for all of us. And so I think that when white dignity communities realize that the reason why we're talking about border issues, or the reason why we're talking about Black Lives Matter, or the reason why we're singing in multilingual ways, that the reason why we're doing this is not just for them, it's for us and our Catholic identity. When that happens, then we'll have an more entree into brown and Black and Asian communities. I think another thing we need to, I'm just going to throw this out there. Again, I think the question becomes, like for my students, when I teach the class, I always make them go to the Dignity website, and they are amazed that you guys exist. I mean, seriously, they are amazed. They are like, you mean there are gay and lesbian Catholics who are part of the church? They have this. I mean, where were these people when I was in high school? Okay, so they are amazed. You guys have no idea how important you are. So I'm telling you that right now. But the other thing that they want to say is that the kids I teach, the college students and young men and women I teach, they are deliberately intersectional. Mm-hmm. And so if your website, if your materials don't talk about race and racial justice as part of LGBTQ justice, then even many of the white young gay people are not going to find the community a very attractive place to be.
Bryan, you were just talking about liturgies, and here's a question from Mary Nichols. To bring everyone to the table, do we need to rearrange the way the table is set? How do the liturgies that are meant to unite reflect our intersectionality?
Sadly, I think that we are far from really grappling with what it means to be truly intersectional and truly welcoming. What does it look like? I think it begins from, again, I think every dignity community is going to be different. So I'm just going to throw some general ideas out there and take what works. I think it begins from a sense of, am I greeted at the door? Am I made to feel welcome when I enter? And it sounds simple, but let me give you two examples of one where it doesn't work and one when it does. So before I even get to the table, am I made to feel welcome? There is a wonderful LGBTQ community that meets here in New York, and I visited it, for mass, and wasn't, wearing my collar, just dressed down. And when I entered, no one greeted me. Everyone gathered in their own group, in their own cliques. They all talked among themselves. They all knew one another, but there was no sense of I'm being welcome. So not only am I a stranger, I'm also the only person of color in a group Why am I even how can I be? We don't even need to talk about music. From the beginning, I'm not feeling welcome. Now, on the other side, years ago, I had the privilege of worshiping with the Dignity community in Honolulu. This was years ago. And they had the custom then, I don't know if they still do it now, but visitors who were there, who were new, they gave us a lei over, to wear around our necks. And it was like, and they, it was like, obviously, welcome, what can we do? This is how we do things here. But it was like, from the beginning, even before we got to the table, I was already welcomed. So I think, so we can get to liturgy, and then we can talk about how the table is set. It goes in terms of whether we offer, options for those who struggle with alcohol addiction, gluten-free hosts, things like that, but also in terms of a sensitivity to language too. That when I hear someone proclaim a scripture translation that uses the word slave, I tense inside. I really do.
Yeah.
Because there's only one group in the United States that's ever had that experience. So I think it's a sensitivity to language. I mean, we try to be sensitive in terms of gender, and that's really wonderful. But I think we also have to be sensitive that there's certain words that resonate in communities of color that really are off-putting. So those are two ideas I throw out there. One is just simply welcome. We're glad you're here.
That's great.
Yeah,
I've had that same experience in Honolulu with that community.
Yeah, isn't it amazing?
And I know I saw Jean Corpus on the list of people here today. I'm not sure if anyone else from Honolulu is here, but
I'll give them a shout out.
Very warm welcome.
And another thing about welcome, and it sounds so simple, but it's so powerful. I remember attending Dignity masses when I was a student at Catholic University in mid-1980s. And this was after the Halloween letter and Dignity groups were kicked out of Catholic parishes. And so we were meeting at an Episcopal church. And I remember walking into the church and feeling angry that here there was this church full of Catholics, and we had to meet in an Episcopal church. And what struck me was that the rector of the church, who was a woman priest, before the mass began, she got up and she thanked us for worshiping in her church. Because, and I'll repeat because I'll never forget that, she said, "You make us inclusive in deed as well as in word. So thank you for being here." And afterwards, I went up to her and thanked her. I shared with her that I was a Catholic priest and that I longed to hear my church thanking gay people for worshiping in the church. And she just looked at me, she gave me this warm embrace and said, "I know you think that we've got it all together, but if you can, stay in your church because we need people like you to move the Jesus movement forward in all of its branches." But just that, the idea of thanking people for worshiping and, welcoming people, that goes a long, long, long way.
Great, thank you. Well, we have one more question here, which might be our last one. This is from Sarah Brosnan. And Sarah asks, given the overlap between the opponents of sexual inclusion and racial justice, why do you think there are so many white LGBTQ plus Catholics who are silent in the face of racial oppression?
That is a great question, and it's one that really troubles me immensely. It troubles me because, according to the statistics, Donald Trump doubled his support among LGBTQ communities, that it went from like 7 to 14%. And also that the majority of white Catholics voted for President Trump, despite everything that we know about his policies. I think part of it is that we just don't, it goes back to something I was talking about, to this tension between that part of our community that wants to be mainstreamed and accepted by the mainstream, and that part of the community that says, no, we really need to work for deeper social transformation. And I think it's a sad reality that among many oppressed peoples is that when you're oppressed and excluded and stigmatized, you want to hold on to whatever scrap of privilege that you think you have. And so if I am a white gay or a white lesbian Catholic, okay, I may be oppressed and stigmatized because of my sexuality, but I'm going to ride that white train as far as I can take it. Not realizing that, these people, white nationalists, are not friends. They are not your friends. They are not your friends. I mean, Donald Trump was not a friend of white trans people. Donald Trump was not a friend of white gay people. He was not a friend of white lesbians. And I think one of the problems in our country is that we have used race as the dividing line, keeping the black and brown poor from the white poor from ever joining forces and working together against a common enemy. We also use the same thing, keeping gay persons of color, LGBTQ persons of color, and white LGBTQ persons from working together. And that's because, there are people who, I'm going to be blunt here. The tendency, this is what white privilege really means. It means I'm going to ride the white train as far as I can. That if this is my entree into privilege, I'm going to take it. And not seeing the illusion for what it is. And not seeing that, these nationalists, that's the reason why I want to belabor the point. White nationalism is not just against black and brown people. It's against women. And they don't care what your political ideology. They treat Nancy Pelosi and Liz Cheney the same way. They are against LGBTQ people. And it doesn't matter whether your skin is as pale as Pete Buttigieg or as black as mine. They are, I just think we need to become far more savvy and to understand that white privilege is a dangerous illusion. It's a trap. And it's a comforting one because, like I said, I ain't got nothing else going for me, but I'm going to ride this. This is what I've got. But in the end, they're not your friends. They're not your friends. And sometimes we just have, that's why I wanted to use the pictures on PowerPoint to make the point plain.
Yeah. That was great. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Bryan. Thank you for your inspiring words and your willingness to engage in this small bit of conversation with our community. We do need to wrap up this segment, but we are capturing all the questions from the Q&A and the comments, and to the best of our tech team's ability, we will try to get some answers out to people in the coming days. And remember, the chat box is available throughout the 2-day session, so you're welcome to continue to share comments there.
So now we invite everyone to take a 15-minute break. Feel free to turn off your cameras and enjoy this time for whatever will refresh you. We want to remind you that if you want to use some of that time to visit our chapel or to chat with friends, and again, the chat function remains open, if you want to leave a comment with any of the participants.
And when we return from our break, we will be going directly into the workshops. And the workshops will begin at 1/4 the hour, depending on where you are. It might be 1:15, it might be 4:15, but that's when the workshops will begin. And you'll need to select one. We know it's hard. All of the topics and the panels are so compelling. But the good news is that we are recording all of the sessions, and we will be making them available. So you'll have the opportunity to catch up with any session that you aren't able to view in real time. So when you come back from our 15, maybe 18-minute break, just go to the schedule and select the workshop you would like to attend live, and you will be brought right into that room when it opens. So we will see you back in a little more than 15 minutes.
Thank you.
And would now like to turn things back to Chris and Lourdes to help us close out today and let you know what to expect tomorrow.
Thank you, Marianne. We do want to remind everyone that the workshops were recorded and they will be available for viewing at a later time, those that didn't have extreme technical difficulties. And we also want to let everyone know that tomorrow's session, which will be shorter, 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern time, is all going to be on the main stage here in Hop-In. So we'll all be together all day. There are not breakout sessions. So hopefully that will be a much smoother ride for us technically.
We certainly hope you will join us tomorrow. We'll let you know what we're having tomorrow. I think there's a slide there.
There it is.
More powerful and prayerful worship time.
We'll have some remarks from our president, Chris Pett, and the introduction of our new board members and incoming officers, including remarks from the new president and vice president.
And recognition of our achievements and extraordinary response to the pandemic locally and nationally. We give thanks. And the commissioning of the new board and our new national leaders.
We'll have some entertainment from the incredible Gina Chavez and an exciting preview of the 2022 National Conference live in person in San Diego. And of course, we will have a closing song of celebration and affirmation.
So before we go into our final song for the day, let's get a sense of how everyone is feeling. If you look in the chat, at the very top, you will see a link to Mentimeter. You can either click on that link, which will open on a new tab in your browser, or if you prefer to do it on another device, follow the instructions showing up on the screen below us.
So hopefully you see the Mentimeter link, and we'll give you a few moments to click on that. Mentimeter is really cool. It'll give you 3 choices of a word or a phrase that you can enter. And we just want to try and collect what your experience was today in this virtual gathering with our beginning prayer, our in memoriam, our moving keynote speaker, and just a word or a phrase about how you feel about this first day of our virtual gathering. I don't know if people are able to access that.
Yeah, we're supposed to have, maybe somebody can tell us if that slide got posted.
Oh, it looks like Melly shared it in the chat.
Okay.
But you'd have to copy that and post it in a new tab. The best laid plans of co-hosts.
Always with technology, right?
Sarah Brosnan has shared it. And then, so what Mentimeter does, if you've, okay, it'll open in a new tab when you click it. And it sort of collects all the words and phrases, and it'll show us what people are, what the most popular, most common responses are. There we go. Oh my goodness, look, it's happening right before our eyes. This is so exciting. I see grateful, inspired, hopeful, energized. Thank you, Melly, for the link. It looks like everyone is getting in and giving us some feedback, connected, blessed, wonderful. Wow.
Grateful. Yeah.
Grateful, hopeful, fantastic, powerful. Wow. Frustrated. We understand that too.
And it keeps
absolutely
it's changing. Inspired is now really big. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Terrific. Blessed.
Hopeful.
Excited. Thank you all for your participation and honesty.
You know, I think it's true between the liturgies and our keynote. We were definitely inspired.
Yes.
And challenged.
And challenged and blessed and grateful. Well, thank you so much for your responses to this. It's very moving and very powerful. And we're going to conclude our time together in song. How else would we end a Dignity Day?
Let this be the time. Come and tear down the old ways and build up the new. Be the God of our promise, all hope rests in you. With the fire of your spirit, place a kingdom of truth. Prepare us for action, let nothing distract us from you. Let this be the time. Let this be the time.
I think I might have sang out loud. If I did and you heard me, I apologize. So thank you for participating today. We look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow.
And if you're not able to be here tomorrow, we want to let you know that you do have the opportunity to pre-register for the 2022 National Conference in San Diego here on Hop In. Because we're meeting virtually, we've provided space in the expo area in Hop In. So you can look for the San Diego pre-registration table. You can sign up, pay a deposit, and get a discount off of the regular registration price. If you're here tomorrow, you'll hear much more about what we're planning for next summer. But if you can't be here, we hope you'll consider pre-registering and supporting our efforts to provide the best possible experience at the 2022 National Conference.
In San Diego.
In San Diego, in person.
Yes, in person. So the hop-in rooms will be open for another 45 minutes to allow for you to continue the dialogue, interact with other people. You're also welcome, of course, to visit the chapel, where you can add a prayer to your book of intentions or experience some of the many activities and reflective pieces contributed by members and communities around the country. So I guess we're signing off, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Hope we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Chris.